Hello, this is Jamie Cornelson with EDL 850, um, Module 11 for tort liability. So the definition of tort liability is an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another that is independent of contract. If injury occurs as a result of the action of school personnel, liability charges may be imminent. Liability may result from deliberate acts committed by another or acts involving negligence. So as I discuss the cases, which cover tort liability, I will be summarizing each case, talking about what might happen if it occurred in my school, what proactive measures could be taken, and how a set of professional ethics could be beneficial in the case. So in the first case, we have Flanagan versus Canton. And in this particular case, students were in a PE class, and at the conclusion of the class, they were to go into the locker room. At that time, the teacher remained in the gym visiting with another student. Students got into the locker room and began engaging in an altercation when the teacher, as I said, was in the gym with another student. Flanagan, the student that was hurt, sustained injuries from their fall. So as I consider this in my school, keeping in mind that I teach in a preschool environment, the PE teacher would be responsible in our case for not supervising the students in their care. Obviously, there is the first rule of preschool is to never, ever, ever leave students unsupervised, and I don't think that it should be any different as students go up in their educational career. So what proactive measures could be taken? Students would not be allowed in the locker room unsupervised. If the teacher was aware that there had been an altercation that occurred in the gym, this could have been resolved before taking the kids into the locker room and done in a more peaceful manner as opposed to letting it escalate and become a bigger issue. And I just think that in this case you could define expectations for teachers and supervising students at all times throughout the school day, and also their proximity. You know, if they were having some trouble in the gym, then it was clear probably that they were going to go into the locker room and continue to have trouble. So just having that proximity with the students could have prevented the whole situation from happening. The second case is of the agitated student, and in this case, a teacher's aide is trying to calm down a child, a rowdy group of students in the classroom, and after, some unsuccessful attempts, the teacher goes over and slams a book on the desk and then grabs the student who was kind of the ringleader, and at this point the student is clearly resisting, that they do not want to be touched, but the teacher gets the child to the timeout area by the arm and gets them to that place. And this caused some unsettling feelings for me because obviously I don't think children should ever be touched in a way that is undesirable to them, no matter what the situation is. So we use something called conscious discipline in our school. And the number one rule of conscious discipline is that you have to have yourself composed and be in a very calm state before you can approach students. So I think probably the teacher in this case, as well as the aide, were not composed, and they just reacted to the students in their care. I would start by removing the aide from the area and possibly any other students in an attempt to keep everyone safe. That's always our first priority, is safety first. And then with that child instead of grabbing them and forcing them to a place that they obviously were not ready to be at, I would offer them choices. Just handling the situation much differently than it was presented, speaking in a low tone of voice, talking to the child, treating them, like a person first. So what proactive measures could have been taken? Like I said, modeling behavior, remaining calm, speaking to them in a low tone of voice, maybe using some visuals instead of a verbal prompt could be helpful. I do think providing a safe place is good, but never forcing children to be in a timeout. That's not appropriate practice. And then offer empathy. I can tell you're upset. What do you notice about the child? Your voice is shouting. Whatever you're seeing, and say, just offer them some empathy that you can tell that things are not going well for them. And then how could a set of professional ethics be beneficial? Putting in a school-wide positive behavior support system would be beneficial, obviously in this case to all the students and the staff, because the staff don't want to be in that situation, but obviously they don't have the skills that they need. So some positive behavior support could be helpful. The next case has to do with recess supervision, and in this particular case we have Susan, who is a second grade teacher, and she's on the playground and notices that a group of third grade boys are playing in a custodial closet on the playground, and they gained access because of a broken padlock on the door. These children happen to be in the third grade, and she says to herself, I know that teacher's going to be coming over, and so in the meantime she hears a loud noise, and when she walks away from the playground she can see that her car has been hit in the parking lot. Obviously this would be an alarming feeling to any teacher or any individual in this situation. And so she leaves the parking lot to go visit with the pastor who had wrecked her car. And all the while those boys are still in the shed, where some cleaning solution is spilled on a child, and he sustained some injuries from that. So again, in this situation, the number one rule is that the teacher should never leave students unsupervised anywhere. So this would include the playground. Also, we would never subject children to playing in a custodial closet where there are dangerous chemicals. So I think the first thing that she should have done, obviously, would have been to lock the closet. If she couldn't lock it due to the broken padlock, she needed to take the children with her to the office, or however she could address that situation. And then, of course, with her car being hit, you don't just leave those kids knowing that they're in your zone of supervision, and you can't watch them when you're not there. So some proactive measures that could have been taken, like I said, she could have gotten the kids out of the closet, told another teacher, I have something over here that I have to deal with. I need you to watch my area or take these children. All that communication has to occur. You can't just walk off. And then how could a set of professional ethics be beneficial? Again, reviewing the supervision policy would have prevented the injuries from occurring with that child. And if there aren't enough teachers on the playground, then they could address that issue, making sure that all the zones are covered and that every child is safe and accounted for. And then we have a case of a Missouri teen who was 14 years old at the time, and a man came to pick her up from school, and this particular man did not have consent to pick her up. She was allegedly raped by the man in a nearby motel, and she is now 21 and suing the principal and an attendance secretary who released her to the man. obviously in preschool we have some pretty strict guidelines and procedures as to who can pick up children and how we keep them safe. And children are never allowed to be released by anyone that does not have a consent signed by the principal or their parent, their guardian. The principal and the secretary would be liable for allowing her to leave with someone who was unauthorized by the family to remove her from school. So the proactive measures that could be taken, obviously before releasing students, you should check to make sure that the person is listed as an emergency contact, and if they are not, then they should definitely not be allowed to take that child. And we have had some particular cases where we've had to call people and say, is it okay for your child to go with this person, and gaining verbal consent and filling out that form. But we don't even really particularly care to do that. We stress really hard to parents that we're not going to release your child to anyone who's not listed as an emergency contact. And if you do send someone, then most likely you're still going to need to come to the school and pick up your child. It's just for the safety of you and your child. So again, setting those policies and procedures in place to release children and maintaining those records. Sometimes that happens that they want someone taken off or they want someone added. So just having that policy at every home visit or at parent-teacher conferences. Let's review this information and make sure that it's still all timely and what you want on the records. So the last case I did was Mosley versus Portland Public School District, 1J. And in this case, Cressida Mosley was attending Jefferson High School, and during her lunch hour, she became involved in a fight with another student, Wanda Griffin. And Wanda had gained access to a box cutting knife, and she stabbed Mosley several times. And none of the security personnel were in the hallway when the altercation occurred. And obviously Mosley sustained injuries to her chest and face and suffered permanent scarring. So this one was a little harder for me because hopefully no preschoolers are ever gaining access to a knife or any sort of a weapon. But I think if this happened in my school, I would want to reconsider placement of security. And just during those unstructured times, obviously you're going to need more supervision. So making sure that the lunchroom, the hallways, in those times of unstructure are really well maintained and supervised. And then I think about the bystanders, the other students that were watching, if they had been given a voice, possibly they could have stepped in before it escalated to the degree that it did. But those are just some thoughts that I had. Some proactive measures, maybe they need metal detectors in the school to ensure that no weapons are being brought in. And then, doing some pre-teaching and discussion about fights and conflict resolution and what can be done before, like I said, things escalate. And you always want to take safety into account for all individuals at the school. So whether it be the staff, the students, the victims, everybody, we want to be in a safe and loved environment. So this was really interesting to me. I enjoyed, looking at all of these cases, and I learned a lot. Thanks for watching.